Dave Grohl, the Storyteller. Chekov's gun shooting through a Boston cream absent of filling. Alright, so here I got Dave Grohl, the Storyteller. It is a memoir, autobiography, written by Dave Grohl, and was released in 2021. It is a COVID book, which I will talk about in a bit because I never really thought of that as a thing. It is fun, passionate, lacking, exciting, incredibly incomplete. I'm going to walk you through my intro really quick. If you don't know what Chekov's gun is, it basically is I don't know what to call it, a literary device. Basically, it mostly has to do with drama and acting more so than books, but it can apply to that as well. It applies to stories. It applies to storytelling. There you go. Where basically, I might be getting the acts wrong, but it's like, if a gun is shown in the first act, it better go off in the third, is like the really quick way to express that. So Chekov's gun is just saying, like, you can't mislead the audience to such a degree where you would show like foreshadowing of something and then never get to it, because that is like a betrayal of the job of the storyteller. And I am all for art that is disruptive and art that does things differently and changes narrative of what you think art could be. This is not doing that, because that would have to be deliberate. This is doing it deliberately, but it's not. It's deliberately omitting things, but it's not changing. Like, I want to rewrite what an autobiography should be. I want to change the game. I want to make different rules, and these should be like. It's not doing that. Whereas a lot of visual art could be very disruptive and challenge you to think differently about what art even is. That's not the intention and purpose of this thing. I'm pretty sure of it. Emotionally, where am I emotionally with the book? I'm upset. I'm frustrated. There were passages in it that were heartwarming, but I found that the more that I read, the more hypercritical I became of the writing and of Dave, and then even those things that might be nice weren't nice anymore. Going back to the intro, Chekov's gun shooting through a Boston cream absent of filling. The very beginning of this book is very detailed, very rich in the history of Dave and how he started playing drums and how he got interested in music. And like, it's so wonderful. Gives you a lot of information and it's a lot of heart. But after, I don't even know, the first 10% of the book, it gradually becomes just all heart and no details and information and whatever else. I had written a review already for this for my Instagram and for Goodreads, and you can find it on my Facebook as well. Instagram wouldn't let me. My review was so long and very verbose that I had to split it up into 2 posts. So the thing is that this is not meant to be a tell-all. I understand that, but it's an autobiography, and there's certain things that accompany that a reader would expect in a memoir or an autobiography or a biography, period. And you just don't get those here. You get them in the first little bit, and then after that, you don't. So there is a certain amount of like, well, you shouldn't expect certain things. You do, though. If a book is labeled as a horror, you would expect that it would make an attempt to do something that would scare somebody. It doesn't necessarily mean that it scares you. There's a vast genre of horror. But this, again, not meant to be a tell-all in this way of like a diary of debauchery. Like, it's not about that. And where some things like, like Motley Crue and like all these other like glam bands, and they were living this crazy tour life, and they talk about like sex, drugs, rock and roll, right? Like that's what it's about, and more of like the darker side of things. Like, I don't think that's what this was meant to be. I don't think it was marketed that way, and that's fine. That's not what I'm expecting. But what I am expecting is details on Nirvana, details on Foo Fighters, details on Dave as a person outside of music as well. It is called Dave Grohl, the Storyteller, Tales of Life and Music. His life is very intertwined with music, as it should be, and it makes sense, and I get it. That's great. But he would not, I would say, he would not have an audience if it wasn't for Nirvana and Foo Fighters. I wouldn't be picking up this book. I wouldn't know who the heck Dave is, probably, right? So I want to know about those things. And they are incredibly glossed over. I should say, I don't think I'm giving you spoilers. I think that I am letting you know about the omissions that happen. There are some details about, like, he omitted this thing and this thing and this thing, and I'm going to give you that in this review because it makes sense. But I'm not going to tell you what he does tell you that would be a spoiler of, like, oh, I didn't know that crazy thing. Like, that doesn't even exist here, really. And just whatever. His life is public, which we'll get to in a minute. So, anyway, emotionally, at first, especially, I was like really enjoying it. I was happy. It was filling my heart, and then really soon after that, I was like, what? We're not going to go back to that? What just happened? We just did a drive-by of Nirvana, and it's like, yeah, Nirvana's a band I was in, peace. And like, what? It just, and then I was looking at the book more critically. I was like reading it differently. It's kind of this thing where, like, I review the majority of books I read. Comic books, graphic novels, different art books, like whatever. I don't review magazines really, but I review the majority of what I read, but I don't always look at it like a critic. I'm trying to get lost in the book, and at the very beginning it did that for me, but then I began not necessarily being in the book, but judging it as I was reading it. And part of that is on me, maybe, but I think part of it is the faults with the book, the omissions, the things that I come into this already knowing a little bit about Dave. I think most memoirs or autobiographies or biographies you would read, you want to learn more about someone, you're interested in that someone already. Like, I can only think of one thing that I've read, and it was like Iceberg Slim, Pimp. Like, I don't even remember how I read about it, I heard about it, but I didn't know that dude prior. It was like, man, someone was just saying, like, how good of a read it was, and it was, like, really enlightening, and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like, I'll check it out. But every other thing I've read, that's like, I was like, man, I really want to know more about Brian Wilson. And I read a book, and then I have another one that I want to read. And, like, I want to know more about Dennis Rodman because I really like a lot of this stuff. Or, like, whatever. I'm intrigued. But whatever you come into here knowing, you will gain a little more knowledge. I do believe that. But not at the extent... I mean, this book is almost 400 pages. 50 pages I can cut out immediately, and I'll tell you about that in a bit. But it's just... It omits so much, glosses over things so much. I'm going to tell you about that. I still need to reiterate, the whole thing is done with heart. His passion is there. He's wearing his, heart on his sleeve. It's there. The writing suffers sometimes because his humor, his dad jokes, whatever. Like, it's just like they get a little cornball. But that's just him and his personality, and that's great. I am all for that kind of truth. But what I don't like is when someone's teasing you with something, like the Nirvana thing. He even says, like, it was really tumultuous, it was chaotic, like, things weren't good. And he doesn't tell you why. He doesn't tell you what wasn't good. He doesn't tell you why there was issues. It was like a blip in this book. It was like hardly anything. And he does mention, like, Kurt changed my life. Like, Kurt, like, he changed my life forever, like, whatever. But he barely talks about it. Like, it just isn't happening in the book. He gives you cliffhangers. There's things that, like, he brings up, and then he never brings them up again, and there's no resolution to it. So in that way, when I go back to the adjectives that it's exciting, it is exciting because you're like, oh, what's happening? Like, there's cool things happening, but sometimes they just never go back to it, and that's why it's incomplete. Again, it's the Boston cream without the filling. It's like you were expecting something because of the type of book it is. But as far as storytelling goes, Dave's not very good at it. At least not here, in this format, or it's very deliberate, and I don't know why it would be deliberate. If this was like, again, it's like, if he did, like, if it was like too much, and he needed to, like, have a lesser word count so that more people would buy it, because people aren't going to buy a 1,000-page book as much as they're going to buy a 379-page book or whatever it is. I get that publishers and whatever else, there's a lot of industry stuff involved, and like it needs to be between this and this at the end, and then more people will buy that, and sales and all that stuff. But again, there's so much you could have cut out that's just fluff, right? And for people who are fans and really want to know this stuff, I don't think they're going to complain that the book is bigger. The other option is do 2 books, make it linear, and do like, here's the first half of my life up until this point, and then a couple years later you can do another half or whatever. There's some people that like Marilyn Manson, Brian Warner, like Long Road Out of Hell. I love that book. It's one of the first, probably maybe the first autobiography I ever read. Well, it was with Neil Strauss, written with, but it only covers like up until I think Mechanical Animals, like, I mean, or right after Mechanical Animals, or maybe right after Hollywood, and that's it. And it's like, man, I want more, and I never got more, but at least that part felt complete. It felt like I know this stuff. And he never wrote another book, he had plans to do something, whatever. Anyway, the point is, this covers like from birth to 2021, and there are so many holes of things that you would want to know. The reasons you know Dave aren't, like, Foo Fighters stuff, example of an omission. He does a really good job at the very beginning about talking about how he got into drumming. And then out of nowhere, like way later, he's like, yeah, when I was recording the first Foo Fighters album, I did it all myself. I did all the instruments myself. When did you pick up a guitar? When did you talk about that? When did you discuss even, I know how to play bass. I know how to do guitar. I can record myself. When did those skills happen? We have like a very specific, like, I know he plays guitar. I know that he sings because he's Foo Fighters. I know that. Well, I also know that he drums. And he told us how he got into drumming and how wonderful and magical that was for him. And there's a lot of that there, and there's nothing about guitar. Never even knew how that happened, and then way later it's like, yeah, I could do this one, and then it's like, and he never went back to it. There's things where like there's people in his band that are significant and that leave the band. One sentence, I call them a one-line nod. He does that a lot, where he like says a thing for like with one line, and it's like you could have devoted like half a chapter to that, like easily been like talking about it. And it's stuff that would be good. It's good information. It's not stuff that no one would care about. Other big one, he discusses his kids. You don't even know when he got a partner. He's still with that partner, and they're significant in his life. They got 3 kids together. You find out by the end of it. That's the other thing. It talks about a kid, and then it talks about a second kid, and then at the very end, he just brings up the fact that he's got a 3rd kid, but doesn't say anything about it when he spent time talking about the first 2 kids. And like a lot. And again, nothing about his partner. What else was there that was omitted? Man, there was just like things that I was like, when did this happen? Like, you don't even... It's about life and music, right? And it's not just about... There's things that happen... I don't even know. There's 2 chapters. I'll tell you them now. I might have the titles mixed up a little bit. I guess I can look them up. But I will tell you 2 chapters that are complete fluff, back to back. And I will tell you a little bit about them, but not a lot, because whatever. Down Under DUI and Life Was Picking Up Speed. Back to back, it's like 40-something pages, I believe. They don't need to be there. They don't need to be there. He's talking about something that happened in Australia, not significant really to his life at all. He doesn't call it, it's like a fun story. But that's not what the majority of the book is about. It's not about the debauchery. It's not about the like pranks and weird fun stuff that happens on tour. It's not what the book is about. If it was going to be about that, fine. But that's the only chapter that has that, really. And it's a whole chapter. And then this thing about how he like visits the White House a couple times. Who cares? You went to the White House. That's really great. Those could be one-line nods. Those could be a couple sentences or lines, or maybe a paragraph, but a whole chapter dedicated. You've got like 40-something pages, 50 pages right there, back to back, completely cut them out. No one would care. And yet you like after the second Foo Fighters album, it's like you never talk about Foo Fighters again. And then it's just like all about kids and whatever else. And that's part of your life. And that's great. You're a family man. We know that. Respect that. It's heartwarming. It's beautiful and wonderful, and you do incorporate more music into that through like you meeting your celebrities, and you're a fan first, and I am also a fan first, meaning that like I think most musicians or artists of some nature most of the time are fans first, and like music is so important in my life and has been since I was a youth that like I get that and I resonated with that, and then I started to get critical of the things that he left out because I'm a fan first and he's a fan first. Would he not realize that his audience would want to know certain things? That's where it came down to. So again, he's got cliffhangers he leaves you to die on. He doesn't talk about siblings either. That's the other thing. He just like, there's like a nod at the very end of like, oh yeah, nod to my, you have a sister? Or like, you like, he's talking about just, yeah, he's got a brother at some point and it's just like, you don't hear any details about it. Major glossing over of stuff. It seems like almost a deliberate tease. Here's the thing. He's like such a nice guy and everyone else's well, whatever. He's rumored to be just like the nicest guy ever. I don't dispute that, never met the guy, but I think he seems really genuine. This book doesn't seem like he is inflating himself or emphasizing things just to be cool and more exciting. This seems really honest to me and genuine. But those things that he's omitting, is it because he doesn't like to speak about them? He doesn't want a certain amount of his private life? What is he, protecting his partner but not his kids? Like, people that are not even with us anymore, that are dead, he won't talk about their relationship. Is it too painful? He does express some things here that are painful, but again, if you don't want to talk about your private life, that's fine. Wanting to have a private life at a certain amount is fine. You're writing a memoir and an autobiography. Do I expect to know every dirty little secret ever? No, I don't. But I do expect to know some things. But he just gives you a taste of like, things weren't good in the Nirvana camp. Never talk about it. Don't say that then. Just don't bring up the fact that things were bad. If you're not going to talk about why they were bad. That is a huge significant thing. That like, with all due respect, there's a certain generation that doesn't know the band Scream. He gives us a lot of details on that. It was his favorite band. He ended up joining it, whatever. That's sick. I'm so like, that was rich stuff that I didn't know about. Again, that's in the very first section of the book. I enjoyed learning that. I am more informed, and it was great, and it helped me understand Dave better. But Nirvana, I know that name. Foo Fighters, I know that name. His days in Scream aren't really well known. That band didn't reach as far for anybody as those other two bands. And I think he would agree with that. So why do I have more information about Scream than I do about the other two bands? The one you've been in for like a couple decades now. And there's more information about that. I have more information, I think, about them Crooked Vultures in this book than I do about Nirvana or Foo Fighters. It's bananas. Not literally, it's just that the ratio is so skewed. That like there's some information about his time with them Crooked Vultures and it just seems like, okay, that's cool. But it's like that should be a footnote. Like, in comparison to the other stuff. But the other stuff, whatever. I think you get it. Target audience, I think if you're a fan of Dave Grohl, his music, I think that you would want to pick up the book. Will you like it in the end? I don't know. There's a lot of heart. I did learn stuff. But the amount of stuff omitted and the amount of fluff that he put in instead, not happy about it. I don't know what to say. I feel like I like him less. And I don't think it is the job of a good memoir or biography to make you like or dislike the person more or less. I don't think that's the job of it. I think it's about truth and honesty, and I think it's for first and foremost for the writer to purge, to reflect, to learn things while they're writing. I'm not saying that he didn't do that here, but I said for the writer first. There's still an audience, and I think he forgot that. So target audience for this, if you're a fan of Dave's music or Dave, I think you will learn stuff that you didn't know. Importance and function, I think this functions as, again, if you want to know more about Dave, you will learn more about Dave. I would say it is not an important book unless you want to learn more about Dave, but even then, I can't imagine many people being like, oh yeah, that's great. I didn't really want to know that much about Nirvana and Foo Fighters anyway. I just wanted to learn all about his kids and how he went to the White House a couple times. That's way more important. I didn't want to know about his wife either, though. Like his kids, like you know what I mean? Like there's just it's so spotty. So I think that it is informative to a degree, but it's not that much. It is entertaining. It is exciting because there's just like cool stuff happening, but then it ends. Chekov's gun all over the place here. Or the absence. Yeah, anyway. Where would I put it on my shelf? Low to mid. It also feels weird because this is my girlfriend's book that she got as a gift. And she really, really enjoyed this book. She read it in like a day or like maybe 2 days. It took me a while to get through it. Not because I wasn't enjoying it, but just like it took me a bit. So like being really critical of it is weird. Because anyway, if I owned the book is the point, and if it was on my shelf, I would keep it on my shelf. I wouldn't take it off the shelf. But it's going to, in the context of biographies or just books in general, it's going to be low to mid on my shelf. Because, yes, I learned some things about Dave, but I also feel frustrated by the book, and not in a good way, that makes you really think, and it's provocative, and you're like, oh man, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what to think. That's not what it does. Last thing I think I can say to wrap things up is that I forgot what I was going to say. That's cool. The book... Oh, the COVID book thing. He mentions at the very end that he started writing this because of COVID, and he's like, I didn't know what to do with myself, so I decided to write a book. The jacket, or sleeve, whatever you want to call this part of the book, he didn't write this. I mean, this is publisher stuff, and they get someone to do this, but we know Dave Grohl as one of our most treasured musicians. Now, the Storyteller introduces him as a gifted, engaging writer. I would say that Dave is an artist, and he's poetic, and I think that when this says most treasured musicians, I don't dispute that. I love his music, I think it's beautiful, but I think he left the poetics and the art at the door when he went into whatever rooms he went into in order to write this book, because gifted, engaging writer, he is not.